Hey guys, tonight we drift into the candlelit corners of science history, the kind that smells faintly of melting beeswax, dusty parchment, and just a pinch of philosophical heresy. You're not jumping into a typical classroom timeline tonight. This is where the gears of rationality grind just softly enough to let something strange slip through. Imagine a low-lit room in 17th century Europe, shadows of quill pens twitching on the wall, and in the margins of your math notes, a pentagram. So, before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. And if you're cozy where you are, drop your location and the time in the comments. Let's see who else is drifting off across the world tonight. Now, dim the lights, maybe open the window for that soft wind blow, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. You uncork the lid on a dusty old century, the Enlightenment specifically. Candlelight flickers on brass instruments as you lean in, elbow brushing a scroll covered in strange diagrams. Newton's laws are etched beside alchemical suns, and on another table, a jar of phosphorescent powder glows with ghostly light. You're surrounded by thinkers who whisper in Latin, but doodle in symbols no one at the Academy wants to admit they understand. Sir Isaac Newton, our physics poster child, spends his nights decoding the Book of Revelation. That's right, he's juggling calculus by day and hunting the Antichrist by night. Historians still argue whether Newton's obsession with biblical prophecy diluted or deepened his scientific insights. But here, in your sleep-soaked mind, it's all the same swirl. You rub your eyes, and the Principia becomes a grimoire. Alchemy and science weren't always enemies. Before the periodic table marched into classrooms, metals were believed to possess hidden souls, and tucked inside the alchemist's ambition was something Luciferian, literally light-bringing. In fact, the Latin Lucifer simply means light-bearer. When scientists first isolated phosphorus, glowing eerily in the dark, they called it the devil's element. You swirl a flask, and it casts pale arcs across the ceiling, like a second moon. You're watching a scientist scratch a circle into chalk, then a triangle inside it. His powdered wig bobs thoughtfully as he calculates planetary orbits and mutters about divine geometry. Some of these men believed God spoke in math. Others suspected something. Older, you might find a drawer in this room filled with sigils mistaken for scribbles. A sideways figure 8, the infinity symbol, wasn't just a math trick. It resembled the ancient Ouroboros, the snake that eats its own tail. A reminder that even in scientific loops, mysticism slithered through. You move past rows of books labeled Naturalis Magica and Philosophia Occultae. One particularly strange volume, bound in cracked red leather, has a compass rose etched alongside a six-pointed star. One corner of the room is colder than the rest, as if all the heat has receded from the glow of forbidden knowledge. They didn't burn witches here, no, too refined for that. But reputations caught fire easily. If your discoveries stirred too much curiosity, too much light, you risked being labelled not just wrong, but dangerous. And yet, some pursued the edge gleefully. They called it illumination. One sleepy anecdote: Athanasius Kircher, the Jesuit polymath you've never heard of but definitely would have followed on TikTok, claimed he could decipher Egyptian hieroglyphs through divine inspiration. He built giant sound machines, worshipped volcanoes, and invented a projection system that used light and shadow to conjure spirits in a darkened room. Like a Baroque PowerPoint for summoning ghosts. Back in the study, ink blots form shapes that feel intentional: triangles, rays, and eyes. Some of these diagrams look suspiciously like the back of a dollar bill. But don't worry, the men here weren't plotting shadow governments. They just really liked triangles. Maybe too much. There's an odd, squeaky laugh from a corner table. Robert Boyle, of gas law fame, is showing someone how his vacuum chamber can suffocate a mouse without flame. Chilly, right? But he also spent decades writing about the invisible realm of spirits and demons that might lurk just outside perception. He believed in air pressure and angels. You drift across a globe made of blackened brass. There's no Australia yet, and the stars above are drawn as lions and sea serpents. Astrology and astronomy are still holding hands. Historians still argue whether the separation of the two was clean, or if celestial maps carried hidden intentions, charts not of fate, but of knowledge forbidden too long. Let's not pretend Enlightenment thinkers were all beacons of reason. They were messy, dramatic, and often very sleep-deprived. The light they chased wasn't always metaphorical. Sometimes, it was literally glowing phosphor or a mystical lantern in an underground lab. And if something exploded, even better. Now imagine you're curled up in the corner of this study, half asleep. The candle flames bend towards you as if listening. A breeze flickers through open shutters and flips a page. On it, an eye stares up, stylized, centered in a triangle. You blink once. Maybe it's just a watermark. You wonder, if light equals knowledge, and Lucifer means light-bringer, then were these old thinkers chasing science or something more symbolic? Are you even supposed to be reading this part? Is that a warning label or just fancy Latin? Caveat lector. Read carefully. As you lean back, the whispers fade into equations. The candles snuff one by one, as if someone gently pinched each flame. You're left with a gentle glow from that same phosphorus flask, now cradled in your palm like a miniature sun. Somewhere between science and sorcery, you fall into the next chapter. You drift sideways through time, still cushioned by the soft fog of candle smoke and vellum dust, and find yourself reclining in a chair that smells of velvet, cigar ash, and secrets. The room is warmer now, fireplaces crackle softly, and someone in a powdered wig is pouring brandy by the crystal tumbler. Welcome to the 18th century salon, where the devil wears silk, quotes Plato, and possibly just gave you a little nod from the corner. You glance around and realize the discussion tonight isn't just about astronomy or ethics or the newfangled steam engine. No, these men and women sit politely while sketching obscure symbols in the margins of their notebooks. They're talking about Lucifer, not the red-horned cartoon villain, but Lucifer the metaphor, Lucifer the rebel, Lucifer the spark that dares to challenge divine order. Historians still argue whether these gatherings were genuinely heretical or just theatrically philosophical. Either way, you're here now, and someone's just handed you a pamphlet titled "The Light of Reason adorned with..." Oh look, an eye in a pyramid. Again, that's the thing about this period. You can't swing a compass without bumping into symbolism. A lot of it seems suspiciously occult-flavored. But here's the sleepy catch. Many Enlightenment thinkers use the figure of Lucifer not as a deity or demon, but as an allegory for the pursuit of knowledge. A Promethean archetype, a light-bearer. Sound familiar? You sip brandy as a debate unfurls across the room. The question on everyone's lips: is mankind meant to know everything? Or are we trespassing with each discovery? A man in a waistcoat claims that Lucifer represents intellectual freedom. A woman with ink-stained fingers counters, or hubris in disguise. There's laughter, then silence. Then someone mentions Freemasonry. Oh yes, here we go. You follow a quiet gentleman with a silver lapel pin, shaped like a compass and square. He leads you through a bookshelf that isn't really a bookshelf. Behind it lies a spiraling stone staircase, and the sweet, earthy scent of damp brick. A lodge, lit by torchlight. Beneath a painted ceiling of constellations, men in robes mutter pledges. On the floor, a checkerboard pattern mirrors the duality they speak of: light and dark, sun and moon, reason and faith. Freemasonry wasn't just a boys' club with secret handshakes. It was a playground for Enlightenment ideals, sprinkled with ancient symbols: the all-seeing eye, the blazing star, the twin pillars. Historians still argue whether these motifs were leftovers from lost Egyptian cults, borrowed Renaissance drama, or just creative metaphors that got way out of hand. The goat doesn't show up here, not yet. But you do hear someone quote Lucifer as a being who fell for daring to defy tyranny. Again, it's framed not as evil, but as a philosophical stance. You lie back on the cool marble floor and let the symbols blur into geometry. Here's a fringe tidbit to curl up with. Some early Masons believed that architectural symmetry echoed divine perfection, and some quietly entertained the idea that Lucifer, as the ultimate rebel architect, had simply been misunderstood. They didn't worship him. They empathized with the archetype. You imagine him as the first scientist who asked, "But why?" and got kicked out of heaven for not raising his hand first. You stir as the scene around you shifts. You're now in a tiny bookshop that smells like crushed roses and tobacco. The proprietor, one eyebrow raised, one candle flickering, offers you a leather-bound book with no title. Inside, essays, drawings, and a very serious debate over whether Lucifer is a metaphor for enlightenment or a trap dressed in torchlight. These essays claim the serpent in Eden gave knowledge, not death, that Prometheus and Lucifer are the same myth in different hats, that fire, stolen or gifted, always costs something. You start to nod off and imagine a courtroom drama, Lucifer on trial, Newton as a witness, Voltaire as his defense attorney. "Ladies and gentlemen of the jury," Voltaire smirks, "if thinking is a crime, then let us all be damned." There's applause somewhere far away, or maybe that's thunder. Hard to tell. Here's where it gets even cozier. Certain salons in Paris were rumored to host Luciferian dialogues behind closed doors. Nothing overt, just gentle explorations of taboo ideas. You picture a woman in a red velvet mask reciting a passage about fallen angels being misunderstood astronomers. The room nods in agreement. Then they return to sipping espresso from porcelain cups. It's around this time that painters get in on the act. Romantic artists start depicting Lucifer not as a monster, but a tragic hero with great cheekbones. Pre-Raphaelite drama meets theological fan fiction. There's an especially dramatic canvas of Lucifer curled on a rock, pondering a globe, like a celestial Hamlet asking, "To burn or not to burn?" You start to doze. In this sleepy blur, you wander through a marble hallway where Enlightenment thinkers float like holograms. They're quoting Milton now, which seems to be the bedtime story of choice for secret heretics. "Better to reign in hell than serve in heaven," one of them mouths before dissolving into mist. A little melodramatic? Sure, but you can't deny the aesthetic. Before you go, one last curious gem. A small group of 18th century German intellectuals once formed a secret club where they debated the morality of Lucifer as a symbol of ethical rebellion. They called it, wait for it, the Order of the Illuminati. Cue soft gasp. Though their goals were political and philosophical, the iconography stuck. Even if their members just wanted to reform monarchies, they accidentally gave birth to every future conspiracy theory ever. Now you're floating backward through a long corridor of velvet drapes and flickering candlelight. The lodge, the salon, the bookshop, they all bleed into each other like watercolor. You feel a warm little buzz in your chest, the kind you get when a forbidden thought finds just enough room to settle in. You close your eyes. In the darkness behind your lids, a star flares briefly. A light. A question. You don't answer it, not yet. You open your eyes, and everything is humming, softly, electrically, like the way fluorescent bulbs buzz when the room is too quiet. The air smells like copper wires and wet ozone, and your fingertips tingle as if you've just rubbed them across velvet and static. You've drifted into the age of electricity, and it's bright, too bright for comfort, like someone lit a star and forgot to put a lampshade on it. You stand in a cluttered lab where glass tubes crackle and coils pulse with eerie, glowing veins of energy. A man in a bow tie and wild hair gestures enthusiastically at a tower of humming metal, and you realize, Nikola Tesla's awake again. You're in the middle of one of his late-night experiments. He doesn't see you. He's too busy talking to lightning. Electricity, the literal light bringer. You're watching scientists harness power once thought divine, and yet, right here in the heart of rational science, Lucifer peeks through, not with horns, but as metaphor, myth, mood. Historians still argue whether Tesla's obsession with wireless transmission was science or dream-soaked mysticism. And that's the thing. This era didn't banish symbols. It rewired them. Look closely. The light wasn't just about illumination. It was about power, control, rebellion. Even in the pure language of voltage and current, you hear whispers of older, stranger currents. Take Alessandro Volta. His voltaic pile, the ancestor of the battery, was more than just metal and acid. It was a philosophical puzzle. Where does energy begin? Is it summoned? Is it stolen? People joked that he was summoning spirits from inside the zinc. You're not so sure they were entirely joking. Here's your quirky tidbit. In some fringe circles of the early 19th century, people believed electricity could reanimate the dead. Mary Shelley didn't invent Frankenstein in a vacuum. She was riffing off real science chatter. Some even said the spark of life might be the same spark Lucifer brought when he fell. Cute bedtime idea, right? Makes you want to turn your nightlight on. As you float through these humming labs and smoky lecture halls, you start to notice the language. So many light metaphors. Enlightenment, illumination, lucidity. The very word Lucifer comes back again, not shouted in panic, but whispered in admiration. As if the more humans mastered lightning, the more they empathized with the one who first dared to steal fire from the gods. You pass a chalkboard covered in equations. One corner has a doodle, a flaming torch crossed by a serpent. A joke, a warning, or just someone drawing too late at night. There's a room nearby filled with turn-of-the-century seances. You hear static on a radio that hasn't been invented yet. Thomas Edison once claimed he could build a machine to talk to the dead. He didn't finish it. Or maybe he did. Either way, the blueprints were lost. And that seems suspiciously poetic. The Victorians were in love with electricity, but not just as a power source. They believed it connected this world to others, like a cosmic telephone wire. You peer into a parlor where mediums sit with electrodes gently pressed to their temples. Outside, gas lamps hiss with golden halos that cast long, twitching shadows across cobblestone streets. One medium opens her mouth, and you swear the voice isn't hers. This age worshipped progress, but under that polished brass optimism, the Luciferian archetype evolved again. No longer a fallen angel, now he was an icon of unshackled curiosity, of dangerous knowledge sparking in glass. His new altar, the lab bench. Tesla himself once said he received visions of inventions fully formed, as if delivered from beyond. He wrote about light beings, communication with Mars, and a cosmic core of information no one could quite explain. Scholars still debate whether he was visionary, eccentric, or just sleep-deprived on a dangerous diet of stress and voltage. You float past a scene at a World's Fair pavilion. Huge metal towers covered in electric arcs, with audiences gasping like it's sorcery. And it sort of is. One ad shows a robed figure holding a glowing orb, captioned, "Electricity, master of light and time." Looks a bit like a wizard, or an archangel, or, well, you get the idea. Down another hallway, a librarian gently pulls out a patent record. The symbol etched on the cover, a six-pointed star crossed with a lightning bolt, looks oddly ancient. But it's dated 1892. Coincidence? Conspiracy? Collective subconscious playing dress-up again? Here's a detail you can snuggle up to. Early electricians were often called light doctors, and in fringe health circles, electricity was believed to cast out darkness from the body. Lucifer as light bringer, now in the form of a jolt to your nervous system. No big deal, just lie still and breathe. You tiptoe into a quieter room, an observatory this time. Someone's scribbling constellations and radio signals, arguing that stars aren't just celestial fires, but transmitters of energy. A sleepy scholar claims that knowledge flows from heaven like light waves, and we're just slowly tuning our human receivers to catch it. Another mutters that the first angel to tune in got banished. You sit in a plush armchair and let the hum wrap around you like a weighted blanket. Everything in this era buzzes, lab equipment, philosophical debates, even the wallpaper seems to vibrate with potential. The scientific revolution wasn't clean. It crackled, and in every brilliant spark, a little shadow flickered behind it. You remember that early metaphor? Fire stolen from the gods, the modern Prometheus. They weren't just talking about the novel, they were naming a mood, a myth remixed by copper and wire. Before you leave this electric lullaby, glance once more at the old lab bench. The coil glows with a low, steady light. It's not warm, exactly, but it wants to be. And deep inside, you feel the thrum of it, the same energy that lit up the darkness in those first brave minds. Not evil, just forbidden, tempting. You blink. The lights dim. The coil sighs. And you drift on, wired, curious, quietly glowing from the inside out. You're drifting now, through velvet twilight, and into a chamber lined with crimson wallpaper and heavy velvet curtains. The air smells of wood polish, incense, and something faintly metallic, like antique coins left too long in a drawer. A golden phonograph plays in the background, something slow, orchestral, haunting. Welcome to the fin de siècle, Paris, London, Vienna, the late 1800s and early 1900s, when symbolism bloomed and Lucifer found a new wardrobe. You find yourself at the edge of an artist's studio. Candles flicker low, casting looping shadows across canvases that scream with drama. Half angels, half devils, all cheekbones. These aren't Sunday school illustrations. These are decadent. You get the sense that everyone here reads poetry late at night and hasn't eaten a vegetable in weeks. Lucifer, in this era, becomes beautiful. Not monstrous, not grotesque, but tragic, desirable, melancholy. A fallen star wrapped in velvet. You sit on a stool, watching an artist in a paisley vest, mix crimson with midnight blue, to paint a version of the morning star reclining on a shattered column, gaze fixed upward, feathered wings in ruins. Historians still argue whether these artistic interpretations were symbolic expressions of repressed rebellion, or just fashionably blasphemous attempts at edgy relevance. But either way, the figure had shifted again. Lucifer wasn't just a metaphor now. He was a muse. Your foot nudges a book on the floor. Baudelaire's Les Fleurs du Mal stares up at you. One of the first poets to openly flirt with Lucifer as a kind of existential anti-hero. Not to worship, but to understand. To embody alienation, beauty, sorrow. You turn the page and find verses where angels fall not out of sin, but out of freedom. Now that's French. Across the studio, someone mentions theosophy. Ah yes, Helena Blavatsky enters the chat. You walk through thick velvet curtains into a drawing room perfumed with amber and eucalyptus. A woman in a high-collared black dress stands at a lectern, eyes blazing. She's describing cosmic hierarchies, hidden masters, and a concept that makes you blink twice. Lucifer, she insists, is not the enemy of man, but the liberator of souls from ignorance. Your fringe tidbit. In Blavatsky's The Secret Doctrine, Lucifer is reframed as the force that awakens consciousness. Less evil overlord, more spiritual software update. Not everyone bought into her claims, but the symbolism stuck. This wasn't church doctrine. This was mysticism meeting science fiction before either had proper names. The wallpaper shimmers as you pass into a new room. A society ball. Strings are playing softly in the background. Gowns shimmer like oil on water. On the wall hangs a painting of Lucifer as the bearer of the torch, a dandy in a tailcoat holding a lantern. There's even a bit of wink to it. The upper crust may wear pearls and gloves, but they're flirting with the forbidden like it's a parlor game. You see little signs, rings with twin snakes, cufflinks shaped like pentagrams, a brooch with a morning star carved into onyx. It's all subtle, or at least it thinks it is. One gentleman leans in to tell you about Lucifer magazine, which was actually a real thing, founded in 1887. Not a tabloid of the damned, but a theosophical journal. Its goal? Illuminate spiritual truths and challenge dogma. Bold choice of name though, no? You drift on into a smoky room where Oscar Wilde holds court with cigarette holder in hand, declaring that Lucifer fell for love, not pride. Someone snorts, but someone else nods solemnly. The joke, the pain, the symbolism, they're all tangled together now. A soft murmur of rebellion disguised as wit. It's not just writers and painters. Architects get involved too. You walk through a Gothic building, towering spires, stained glass windows full of strange geometries. A a fallen angel sculpted into the trim, gazing down not in menace, but quiet resignation. Historians still debate whether these were coded messages, or just artisans flexing their imagination. Either way, the impression lingers like perfume on lace. Someone is trying to tell you something, sideways. There's a salon downstairs with golden lamps and books stacked in spiral shapes. A whispered conversation unfurls about the Luciferian archetype as a metaphor for psychic evolution. A soft laugh floats in the air. If God is the status quo, someone murmurs, Lucifer is the question mark. You don't write it down, but the words settle in your chest like warm brandy. By the time you reach the next room, the candlelight has grown warmer, the scent heavier. You're in a perfumery. Bottles of violet glass with names like Infernal Bloom, Seraph's Fall, and Divine Rebellion. You dab one on your wrist, notes of smoke, sandalwood, and citrus. You breathe it in and imagine an angel pausing at the edge of heaven, glancing backward with a smirk. Here's something soft to fall asleep to. Even the tarot got involved. The card originally called the Morning Star became the devil in popular decks, but not always. In certain esoteric variations, it's still the bringer of light, the challenge of truth, the flame that says, "Are you sure you want to know?" You glide now toward the opera house, a final decadent performance. On stage, a dancer twirls in crimson silk, portraying Lucifer not as destroyer, but as seducer of truth, drawing mortals not to fire, but to self-awareness. The music swells, the curtains fall. The audience claps politely, but their eyes are wide and quiet. And there you are, once again, alone in the hallway. Your reflection in a gold-framed mirror looks a little more curious, a little less afraid. You touch your collarbone and feel a warmth there, like the residue of a light just snuffed out. You've seen Lucifer's new shape now, romantic, poetic, almost sympathetic. He doesn't growl, he sighs, he doesn't conquer, he questions. And you, dear dreamer, are learning to do the same. The marble floor beneath your bare feet feels colder now, smoother, like you've wandered into a space between temples and theatres. The air is heavy with incense and the distant echo of whispered Latin. You look around and realize you've entered the golden-lit world of secret societies. Everything smells like wax, wine, and the slow burning of ancient ideas trying to act casual. The first thing you see is a symbol, a compass and square, locked together like a puzzle, hovering above an eye that doesn't blink. You're standing at the threshold of a Masonic lodge, not a conspiracy theory, but the quiet, candlelit sanctuary where symbols speak louder than sermons. Everything here hums with purpose, from the checkerboard floor to the way every chair seems to face both inward and upward. Tonight, Lucifer doesn't arrive in flames. He steps in dressed as a metaphor. In Freemasonry, there's a long and winding debate about the so-called great architect of the universe, a term intentionally broad. Not God necessarily, not God either, just intelligence, light, structure. Historians still argue whether the Masons viewed Lucifer as a symbol of enlightenment or rebellion. Some even whisper that to climb the highest degrees of initiation is to come face to face with knowledge too pure for public eyes. You drift through the chamber, and symbols press themselves into your periphery. The blazing star, the letter G, the twin pillars of Boaz and Yakin. In the hazy candlelight, the star sometimes gleams like an open wound, sometimes like a lighthouse. One initiate stands before it with closed eyes, reciting a vow that feels older than language. There's your mainstream fact. Albert Pike, a 19th century Masonic philosopher, did write of Lucifer in his dense poetic treatise Morals and Dogma. He described him not as Satan, but as a force of intellectual awakening, misunderstood, maybe even misnamed. This wasn't devil worship, it was more like intellectual iconography. But of course, the nuance was lost on panicked outsiders. And here's your quirky gem. In some obscure 19th century lodges, initiates performed rituals that reenacted Lucifer's fall as a metaphor for shedding ignorance. They wore blindfolds, followed mazes, and emerged into blinding light, dripping with allegory and candle wax. They said it was about illumination. You wonder if anyone ever flinched at how literal that word feels. Down another corridor, the air thickens with pipe smoke and velvet drapery. You've entered the Rosicrucian salons now, more mystical than the Masons, more cryptic than they are organized. You hear discussions of alchemical transmutation, of hidden codes in the architecture of cathedrals, of ancient wisdom guarded by bloodlines and sigils. One woman lifts a silver goblet and murmurs, "Lucifer is not the devil. He is the herald of transformation." The room nods, as if they've heard this 1,000 times. And maybe they have. You glance at the walls, portraits of angels with broken halos, staircases that spiral into stars. The line between religious and symbolic feels intentionally blurred. These aren't devil worshippers, they're metaphor worshippers. If that sounds equally dangerous, you're not alone in thinking so. Outside, lightning flickers. A storm is passing, or perhaps arriving. You find yourself in a study with shelves stacked to the ceiling, books bound in cracked leather, titles gilded and secretive. The Lost Word, The Blazing Star Unveiled, Codex of the Infinite Temple. A cat with copper-colored eyes slinks past your ankles without a sound. You pull one book open. A diagram, a pyramid, an eye, a flame in the middle. The margins are filled with notes in faded ink. Not evil, necessary. The price of thought. Someone has underlined the word Lucifer and written beside it, bringer of perspective. You take a deep breath and feel something else shift. Lucifer, in these societies, wasn't a figure to worship. He was a cipher, a keyhole, a reminder that light always casts shadows, and only the brave ask why. Another soft detail for your dreams. Some of these secret societies claim descent from ancient Egypt, from mystery schools that revered Thoth and Hermes, gods of knowledge, magic, and liminal truths. Some even equated Lucifer with Prometheus, that old rebel who brought fire to mankind. Fire, electricity, knowledge. It's always the same flame, burning in different languages. Now, you step through a pair of carved oak doors into a temple lit only by moonlight streaming through stained glass. The images aren't biblical. They're mythic. A serpent entwined around a staff, a man reaching toward a sun that looks half human, a child holding a torch. It's all strangely serene, like the story is being told backwards, from fall to ascent. A figure stands at the altar, reading from a scroll. To know, they say softly, is to fall from comfort. To fall is to rise in awareness. The congregation nods in silence. No candles, just moonlight and breath. It doesn't feel sinister. It feels serious. You sit for a moment, cross-legged, tracing symbols in the air with your fingertip. Everything's quieter now, less theatrical. Less about rebellion, more about initiation, inner awakening. You still don't know if it's truth or elaborate theatre. Maybe both, maybe neither. The floor hums slightly. You feel it through your spine. You think of that checkerboard floor from earlier, the interplay of light and dark, not at war, but in a kind of dance, a balance. That's what these societies are chasing. Not chaos, not submission, just understanding. You start to float backward, away from the temple, past the candlelit rituals, past the echoing vows, and back into the still, dark hallway between ideas. Somewhere in the distance, a choir sings a low, haunting note, like a bell ringing inside your ribs. Lucifer, in these hidden chambers, has no tail or pitchfork. He holds a lantern. He asks questions, and sometimes, just sometimes, he answers them. Your steps now echo against old concrete, soft with dust, as you emerge from candle-lit chambers into something colder, more metallic. Gone are the velvet chairs and whispered Latin. Here, the walls buzz with circuitry. The air smells faintly of soldered copper and ozone. You're walking into the 20th century, dreamer, where Lucifer doesn't just wear robes or feathers anymore. He starts to flicker on screens, grin from posters, and slip between sound waves. This is the era when pop culture wakes up, stretches its arms, and realizes it likes to shock people. And who better to shock them with than Lucifer? The floor becomes a stage. Bright lights click on overhead. You squint as spotlights carve silhouettes in the dark. There's a band tuning up. A guitar hums. A bass thuds low like an approaching storm. Welcome to the birth of rock and roll rebellion, where angels trade harps for leather jackets, and the morning star picks up a microphone. Let's set the scene. It's the 1950s. Elvis Presley is gyrating hips on national television, and somewhere in the Bible Belt, a pastor clutches his pearls. By the 1960s, the counterculture stirs, a boiling mix of psychedelics, poetry, and political unrest. Then, seemingly out of nowhere, artists begin dabbling in darker motifs, not out of worship, but out of metaphor, out of performance. And here's your mainstream moment. The Rolling Stones release Sympathy for the Devil in 1968, a song that casually frames Lucifer as a worldly, cultured observer of humanity's worst moments. He doesn't cause the chaos, he witnesses it. The outrage is immediate, but the message lingers. Maybe the devil isn't just red horns and pitchforks. Maybe he's us, refined and amused. Now your quirky fact. In the early 1970s, David Bowie introduces his alter ego, Ziggy Stardust, an alien rock star touched by cosmic knowledge and doomed by fame. In backstage interviews, Bowie flirts with Luciferian imagery, sometimes referencing fallen angels, sometimes claiming he'd seen God in a taxi. Whether it was performance or belief, the effect was electric. Glitter, eyeliner, and existential dread wrapped into one dazzling persona. You drift past a reel of old TV footage. A grainy broadcast shows Aleister Crowley's face, yes, the self-styled magician and ceremonial rebel who declared, "Do what thou wilt shall be the whole of the law." Historians still argue whether Crowley was an agent of chaos, a spiritual seeker, or just a Victorian troll with great branding. But one thing's certain, pop culture ate him up like candy. Crowley appears on the cover of Sgt. Pepper's Lonely Hearts Club Band, staring past Lennon's round glasses and into the living rooms of suburban families. That's no accident. The Beatles, along with dozens of artists, were tapping into something that was bigger than music. They were reviving the aesthetic of forbidden knowledge. You wander past more album covers now. Black Sabbath's self-titled debut, All Doom and Thunder. Led Zeppelin's mystical symbols etched into vinyl sleeves. Occult references bloom like mushrooms, some deep and layered, others tossed in for spice. But the symbols stick. Pentagrams, serpents, inverted crosses. They're not always used correctly, but they look great on t-shirts. The hallway flickers again. And now you're standing in a video set. Fog machines hissing, lights rotating. Music videos enter the mix. Visual storytelling begins to dance with symbolism. You see Madonna writhing on a church altar, wearing a crucifix the size of a dinner plate. In Like a Prayer, the lines between sin and sanctity blur deliciously. People protest, of course. Pepsi cancels a sponsorship. But the iconography sells, because at the end of the day, it isn't Lucifer they're reacting to. It's what he implies. Transgression, independence, agency. Now you float into a movie theater. The screen goes black, then flares to life. A child whispers in Latin. A head spins. The 1973 release of The Exorcist catapults Satan, and by extension, Lucifer, back into the public imagination. But this time, he's not the suave poet from French salons. He's the ultimate villain. Pop culture now dances between two poles, Lucifer as the rebel rock star, and Lucifer as the literal face of evil. And yet, even here, there's complexity. You watch The Devil's Advocate, where Al Pacino, equal parts charming and terrifying, explains that his version of the devil is an enabler of choice. He isn't dragging anyone to hell. He's offering contracts, and humans sign them willingly. There's your scholarly debate. Psychologists and cultural theorists still argue whether this shift in depiction reveals a fear of outside control, or an anxiety about our own agency? Is Lucifer the antagonist, or is he the shadow side of progress itself? You catch your breath as the lights fade again. Neon signs flicker into view. You're strolling down Sunset Boulevard in the 1980s now, shoulder pads and synthesizers humming around you. Satanic panic rises like steam from the sidewalks. Parents panic, talk shows churn, and music is blamed for everything from bad grades to missing kids. Yet most of the accused bands weren't even sure what symbols they'd printed on their merch. It was theater, market-tested rebellion. But the panic gave those images real power. The kind that lingers in the back of your mind as you're trying to sleep. You walk past a display case with a curious object inside. A vinyl record said to contain a backmasked message. Play it forward, it's rock. Play it backward. Someone insists it says, "Serve Satan." You chuckle softly. The human brain, ever hungry for patterns, sometimes finds fire in the noise. Now you're back on the soundstage. A director yells, "Cut!" and the scene resets. Lucifer, through the lens of pop culture, has become flexible. A villain, a rebel, a reflection. Sometimes taken seriously, sometimes played for laughs. Like in South Park, where Satan has relationship problems and a sad pout. Or Lucifer on Netflix, where the morning star runs a nightclub and solves crimes between therapy sessions. In these modern versions, he isn't terrifying. He's relatable, flawed, a little tired, and you, watching from the velvet seat of your dream theater, realize something subtle. Lucifer isn't just a symbol of evil anymore. He's a character arc, one that's constantly rewritten. You lean back in the theater chair, your eyes heavy now. The screen goes dark, only the whisper remains. What if the fall was the beginning of flight? The theater chair you've been sinking into slowly melts beneath you, replaced by velvet shadows and a wide, buzzing stage. The curtains part without sound, and suddenly you're backstage again. But this time, you're behind the glitz. You're in the dressing rooms of the 21st century, peeking into makeup mirrors where mascara smudges mix with sigils and runes, where celebrity becomes modern mythology, and Lucifer doesn't just cameo, he headlines. Welcome to the era of aesthetic Satanism, the part of the dream where you stroll through a scrolling feed of music videos, fashion shows, Super Bowl halftime performances, and TikTok soundbites, each tinged with a wink and a shadow. Here, Luciferian symbolism isn't whispered in lodges, it's hashtagged. Your first stop is a concert. Not just any concert, this one pulses like a heart. Pyrotechnics erupt, dancers descend on wires. A performer struts onto the stage with horns, wings, or sometimes both. You blink. Is that supposed to be the devil? Or is it just branding? There's your mainstream fact. Pop stars like Lil Nas X have leaned directly into Luciferian aesthetics. In 2021, he released Montero, Call Me By Your Name, in which he pole dances into hell and gives the devil a lap dance, before snapping his neck and taking the throne. The internet erupted. Conservative groups protested. The artist, meanwhile, sipped tea and sold Satan-themed sneakers. It wasn't just shock, it was strategy. Because in a media-saturated world, controversy is currency, and your quirky detail. A limited edition of those sneakers, produced in collaboration with a streetwear collective, reportedly contained a single drop of human blood in the sole. Whether it was real or not didn't matter. The idea went viral. The line between metaphor and meme blurred completely. You smile, because nothing says modern ritual like going viral. The dressing room door creaks behind you. You step into another corridor filled with perfume and flashbulbs. Celebrities and influencers pass by in slow motion, their outfits stitched with serpents, goat heads, and inverted stars. Not because they're summoning demons, but because they're summoning attention. You float into a Met Gala, where gothic glamour and biblical motifs walk hand in hand. One guest arrives in a blood-red cloak with a golden crown of thorns. Another dons wings made of black feathers and mirrors. You glance up at a chandelier shaped like an open eye. Somewhere, Someone whispers, Illuminati confirmed. But are they serious? Are you? That's the trick of it all. This modern iconography wears irony like cologne. Heavy, layered, fashionable. Now you're drifting past a studio set. A music video is filming. The lead wears glowing contacts and holds an apple shaped like a heart. The aesthetic is clear. Temptation, fall, power. But it's all set to a beat you could dance to in a club at 2 a.m. You realize Lucifer doesn't need cathedrals anymore. He's in the filters, in the choreography, in the way people remix the old stories until even the serpent starts to sound like the protagonist. Historians still argue whether this wave of symbolism reflects a genuine shift in belief or just an endless appetite for provocation. Are we more secular now, or just more self-aware about our spectacle? Is Lucifer just a metaphor for personal empowerment, for going against the grain, for the kind of beautiful defiance that looks amazing in a GIF? You find yourself outside again, under a sky lit with drones spelling out brand logos. Somewhere nearby, a pop-up exhibit invites people to walk through the underworld in 7 stylish rooms. A few of the visitors are dressed like demons. Some are dressed like saints. Most are just here for the selfies. But every room features a mirror, and each mirror is etched with a phrase, "Know thyself." You glance in one, and for a moment, your reflection flickers. Horns, wings, flames, then just your sleepy face again. You laugh, soft and slow. That's the thing with these symbols. They reflect whatever you're already bringing with you. Now you drift through a podcast studio. The mics are warm, the hosts are sharp. They're discussing the rise of Lucifer in pop media, casually bouncing between Jungian archetypes, comic book villains, and philosophical takes on the fall. Maybe, one says, Lucifer is the perfect character for a post-truth world. Not evil, not good, just aware. You nod, because the lines keep smudging the more you look. The room changes again. You're in a Netflix writer's room. Whiteboards are filled with arcs and notes. Lucifer, despair therapy. God as absentee father. Demons with PTSD. You grin. The show Lucifer, once a fringe DC comic, has been reimagined into a primetime darling, where the devil owns a nightclub, solves mysteries, and works through emotional trauma. It's not blasphemy, it's relatable. And that's the twist. Lucifer today often symbolizes not domination or destruction, but autonomy. Rebellion with eyeliner. Awareness with a killer wardrobe. The morning star, reborn as an icon of choice. Even self-care. You hover now over a cosmetics aisle. The names of the products sing like incantations. Infernal Red. Temptation Noir. Seraphim Highlighter. The branding is elegant, luxurious, and soaked in subtle subversion. Everything sells rebellion now, and rebellion sells very well. You pass a billboard, a streaming ad, a lyric video. The layers are endless. Lucifer as meme, Lucifer as metaphor, Lucifer as mythological protagonist in an age desperate for meaning with good lighting. And here's the lingering question. Is the saturation of these symbols hollowing them out, or charging them with something new? Scholars, spiritualists, and skeptics circle that idea like moths around a neon pentagram. Maybe it's not about belief anymore. Maybe it's about aesthetic theology, how we style our existential crises. You walk through one final velvet curtain and find yourself in a room filled with mirrors, each reflecting different Lucifers. One wears a halo, one wears headphones, one looks like you, one smiles gently and says nothing at all. You stand quietly, taking them in, not as threats, not as idols, but as stories. Because in this new world, Lucifer doesn't have to scream. He just needs a good soundtrack. Your steps now fall silent on a smooth obsidian floor, polished to the point of dreamlike reflection. The mirrors behind you dissolve into the darkness, and you're left with screens, rows of them, glowing faintly. They flicker with static and half-loaded thumbnails. Welcome to the streaming age, where Luciferian symbolism seeps in not with a roar, but with a carefully orchestrated algorithmic nudge. This is where Lucifer lives in your recommendation queue, nestled between a period drama and a true crime binge. You don't notice him at first, until you do. You reach out, and one of the screens plays a show. Maybe it's Chilling Adventures of Sabrina, a teenage witch reboot with a distinctly devilish twist. The Dark Lord is no longer just a shadow in the corner. He's a central character, fully formed, with horns, rituals, and a throne of skulls. But here's the twist. It's campy, glossy, marketed. Teen angst meets cosmic rebellion, wrapped in a color palette curated for Tumblr GIFs. The story blurs morality. Sabrina wrestles not with temptation, but with institutions, with agency. Her Satan isn't a tempter. He's a bureaucrat with a contract. There's your mainstream moment, once fringe, now streamed globally in HD. The quirky detail? In the show's early run, producers were sued by the Satanic Temple for allegedly copying a specific statue design of Baphomet, the goat-headed androgynous figure often associated with occult symbolism. The legal battle was real, but more fascinating? They settled. Which means the image of Satan is now, literally, intellectual property. You glide past the episode list. More titles shuffle into view. Good Omens, with David Tennant's snarky demon Crowley sipping wine and gardening while trying to prevent the apocalypse. The Sandman, with its quiet, ancient Lucifer, played with a chilling stillness that feels more celestial than sinister. And of course, Lucifer himself, Tom Ellis, all charm and therapy sessions, making confessions under chandeliers. Historians still argue whether these portrayals represent a cultural softening toward traditionally evil symbols, or simply a thirst for morally complex characters in an age where black and white narratives no longer resonate. After all, what's more compelling, a perfect saint or a fallen angel trying to self-regulate? Your feet now drift past digital avatars, animation reels, and the kind of edgy thumbnails designed to grab thumbs mid-scroll. You pass a YouTuber mid-rant about the occult in Disney films. Another insists that Beyoncé is part of an Illuminati bloodline. The tone wavers between satire and sincerity, which somehow makes it all feel more viral. And that's the point. You don't need belief anymore. You just need engagement. You stop beside a screen replaying old clips from MTV. Music videos that once pushed boundaries now feel almost quaint. But symbols still glow. The ever-present eye, the serpents, the flashes of red, the masks. It's a visual vocabulary that's been recycled so many times it's become part of the design language. Like the minor chord in a pop song, it signals danger, mystery, power. A new screen loads. It's TikTok this time. Clips under Mai's Witch Talk. Young creators casting spells, drawing pentagrams in glitter, lighting candles with ring lights overhead. Some wear Lucifer-themed merch from Hot Topic. Others quote Jung while adjusting their LED lights. You smirk. This is spiritual rebellion with a side of influencer marketing. You glide through threads and comment sections, past digital incense and virtual altars. The devil, once summoned in darkened chambers, now appears as a filter, a tongue-in-cheek challenge, a meme. But the symbols still hum with charge, especially when worn by people who've been told not to. That's where it clicks for you. The draw isn't just rebellion, it's reclamation. Because for many, Lucifer isn't a literal figure at all, but an icon of resistance. A character that says, I see your rules, I just don't accept them. You float now into an indie game environment, a dungeon crawler where demons are NPCs, and one of them offers emotional support and self-help advice. A visual novel where Lucifer falls in love. A mobile game where you manage the levels of hell like a startup. It's ridiculous, it's meta, it's oddly soothing. You pick up a controller. A cinematic plays, The Fall of the Morning Star, not in fire, but in soft piano and poetic monologue. A reminder that every generation reinterprets the fall in its own aesthetic. For some, it's about ambition. For others, injustice. And for a growing digital audience, it's about the right to question. And there's your scholarly thread. Digital humanists and media theorists continue to explore whether Lucifer in streaming media functions as satire, empowerment, or simply a narrative device to vent cultural anxiety about power. In a world where institutions feel opaque and algorithms dictate fate, the idea of defying celestial order starts to look oddly relatable. You look up. The screens ripple again. A news anchor speaks solemnly about a pop star accused of satanic imagery in a live show. Cut to audience reactions. Some shocked, some thrilled. The outrage loops into promotion. Controversy becomes commodity. Behind that, a documentary series queues up. Symbols of the occult, decoded. The tone is calm, British, reverent. Footage of ruins, ancient scrolls, glowing sigils. You watch as they trace the history of Lucifer from Mesopotamian myths to Black Sabbath album covers to Netflix's top 10. It's strangely hypnotic. You feel the weight of time in your shoulders. Not heavy, just aware, a kind of historical vertigo. Because now you're not just seeing symbols, you're seeing how they're used, over and over. Reinvented, resold, reabsorbed. Lucifer isn't static. He evolves with the medium. He shifts, pixel by pixel, to suit the screen. You take a seat, finally, in a room lit only by tablet glow. The playlist continues. Dark wave synth, spoken word poetry, whispered Latin remixes. Nothing overt, just atmosphere. You're not afraid, you're intrigued, because you understand now. Lucifer in streaming culture isn't a call to evil. It's a wink, a mirror, a challenge. You lean back, your eyes soft, the music pulsing gently in your ears. There's no fire, no brimstone, just the slow rhythm of stories, retold for new screens, new fears, new dreams. The final screen fades to black. A faint reflection of your face lingers, and a voice, barely audible, says, "Play next." You're reclining now, not on a throne, not on a cloud, but in a soft leather armchair with the quiet purr of a library all around you. It smells of paper and dust, but not the old kind. This is curated dust, vintage, the kind that lives on the spine of books that haven't been touched since the Cold War. Welcome to academia, where Lucifer doesn't headline concerts or trend on TikTok. Here, he wears footnotes and haunts conference panels. The air is heavy with polite debate and dry humor. A projection flickers ahead of you, displaying a title that stretches across the screen. Lucifer as Enlightenment Allegory in 19th century scientific literature. A whisper from a professor with elbow patches cuts through the quiet. He's the original symbol of epistemic rebellion, she says, sipping tepid tea. You smile, because even here, between the ivy and the indexes, the devil still stirs. This section of the journey is all about how intellectual circles, especially during the Enlightenment and beyond, recast Lucifer not as a villain, but as a symbol of reason, of light, of refusal to bow to ignorance. After all, what is Lucifer's name but a linguistic gift from Latin? Lux, light, and fere, to bear, the light bringer. You remember your mainstream fact. In John Milton's Paradise Lost, Lucifer's fall is rendered with almost tragic nobility. He questions God's authority, declares better to reign in hell than serve in heaven, and becomes the central voice of defiance. Despite Milton's Puritan intent, many readers sympathized, not with heaven, but with hell's eloquent exile. He became an icon not of evil, but of autonomy. Now, during the 18th and 19th centuries, thinkers like William Blake, Percy Shelley, and Lord Byron all flirted with Lucifer as a Promethean figure, a rebel who dared challenge tyranny. He wasn't summoning demons, he was summoning thought. Blake went so far as to say that Milton was of the devil's party without knowing it. You chuckle softly at the idea of a poet accidentally cosplaying a revolutionary. And here's your quirky gem. In 1830s France, a radical journalist named Alphonse Esquiros actually published a book called L'Évangile du Diable, the Gospel of the Devil, casting Lucifer as a misunderstood revolutionary, complete with poetic praise and political satire. It was banned, naturally, but its ideas fluttered through Parisian salons like perfume, bold, seductive, and just dangerous enough to excite. You drift through a long oak corridor lined with busts of philosophers. Descartes furrows his brow. Voltaire smirks from beneath his wig. You pause near a chalkboard where someone's drawn Lucifer, not as a beast, but as a torchbearer beside Newton and Galileo. The implication: knowledge can be just as heretical as sin. Historians still argue whether this romanticized Lucifer was simply a literary metaphor or a deeper philosophical pivot. Did the thinkers of that time genuinely revere the morning star, or were they just using him to poke the clergy with a clever stick? Was it belief or branding? A bell tolls softly above, and now you're in a reading room where students are highlighting passages from Nietzsche. One quotes aloud, "The devil is the spirit of gravity." You try to figure out if that's profound or just German. Either way, it fits. Because as science advanced, defying old religious models of the universe, the role of Lucifer morphed again. He became an avatar for progress. A little dangerous, yes, but thrilling. Like standing too close to lightning. The next scene slips into view like ink soaking into parchment. You're inside a Masonic lodge, but not the spooky kind. This one smells of pipe smoke and powdered wigs. Papers are being read, diagrams unfolded. You catch snippets about symmetry, mathematics, and the divine architect. Some theories link Lucifer to Venus, the morning star, associated with both beauty and rebellious visibility. After all, Venus rises early, outshining all but the sun. She knows how to arrive before the curtain. And then, a detail that curls at the edge of your mind like steam. In certain strands of theosophy and early occult science hybrids, Lucifer was portrayed not as a devil, but as a cosmic principle, a being of wisdom. Blavatsky, the 19th century mystic, argued that Lucifer was a symbol of enlightenment, not depravity. She said, he gave us reason, intellect, even the thirst to know the stars. A celestial dissenter turned spiritual guide. You walk past a cracked globe. It rotates slowly, continents painted in muted gold. A pin marks where Giordano Bruno was burned for, among other things, suggesting the universe had no center, and that there were infinite worlds. You can't help but wonder, did he see Lucifer not as a demon but as a kindred mind? Your footsteps echo again. You find yourself in a classroom filled with diagrams of DNA, telescopes, and circuit boards. The instructor, without breaking eye contact, says, "The devil's in the details." The class laughs. But it's not just a phrase anymore, is it? Lucifer, once a roaring beast of medieval imagination, now creeps between the fine print, between what we see and what we dare to ask. This is the quietest form of rebellion. No horns, no flames, just thought. As you move forward, you pass a series of paintings. The angel before the fall, wings pure and expression proud. Then another, post-fall, cast out, wings scorched, eyes still burning with something unrepentant. And finally, Lucifer not weeping or raging, but writing. Always writing. He's become the patron saint of thinkers, artists, outcasts, who'd rather risk exile than repeat the script. You exhale, slowly, because the dream is coiling in strange, elegant ways now. The devil doesn't shout anymore. He lectures, he publishes, he teaches seminars. The lights dim in the library. Books close themselves. And before the room fades completely, you hear one final whisper, half lecture, half lullaby. Lucifer fell not for pride, but for asking why. The library dissolves around you now, not in fire, but in gold. Every surface shimmers with wealth. Not the loose coin clatter of pocket change, but the whisper of rare metals, secret vaults, and the shimmer of black credit cards you'll never hold. You're not in hell anymore. Well, not the old one. You've stepped into something slicker, shinier, a penthouse of quiet power. Welcome to the financial elite's Lucifer. He doesn't lurk in dungeons here. He negotiates from corner offices with panoramic views. You walk across marble floors in shoes you didn't bring, passing glass sculptures shaped like horns, just abstract enough to pass as modern. The receptionist offers you a smile like a business card. It's all very polite, very global, very soulless. Lucifer, in this dimension, wears a suit tailored by the invisible hand. He doesn't tempt you with apples. He offers investments. He whispers in quarterly earnings calls. You spot a Forbes cover on a nearby table. The rise of the rebel CEO. The photo's backlit to give him a faint halo. Unintentional, surely. The mainstream breadcrumb here? Well, ever since the 1980s, pop culture has made a cozy nest for the satanic executive. Think Gordon Gekko's infamous "greed is good," or Patrick Bateman's bloody obsession with status. In both fiction and whispered conspiracy, Satan's become shorthand for unchecked capitalism, a stand-in for a system where profit justifies anything. And here comes your quirky historical footnote. In the 1920s, an obscure religious pamphlet accused the Rothschild banking dynasty of being agents of Lucifer, complete with diagrams, financial records, and speculative maps. It wasn't accurate, obviously, but it spread. These pamphlets eventually bled into modern conspiracies about the Illuminati, New World Orders, and demonic banking cabals. And now, these same tropes echo in half-baked YouTube essays and late-night Reddit threads. Different format, same fuel. You glide into a silent boardroom now. At the head of the table sits a man, or is it? His face obscured by light, voice deep and soothing. He speaks not in threats, but in percentages. Our projections for influence have grown 14%, he murmurs, sliding a chart across the table. The graph is shaped like a pitchfork. Not a coincidence. Historians still argue whether this overlap between Lucifer and capitalism emerged from genuine fear of wealth's corrupting force, or if it's a convenient narrative to mask deeper systemic issues. Is the devil really in Wall Street, or is he just a scapegoat for structures too complicated to decode at bedtime? You move again, now through a gala. Wealth swirls like perfume. People wear crimson accents, pocket squares, lipstick, cufflinks, all part of a trend that no one acknowledges but everyone follows. One woman's gown glimmers like molten gold, and on her necklace, a tiny inverted star nestled beside diamonds, a fashion statement, or a wink. A waiter offers you a champagne flute. You notice the label. It's a boutique brand, Morningstar Reserve. You take a sip. It tastes like indulgence with a finish of irony. Nearby, a conversation drifts into your ears. Oh, I just adore the devil aesthetic lately. It's so unapologetic. Yes, it's like finally someone owns their ambition. You can't tell if they're joking. You're not sure they can either. Next, a panel discussion begins. The topic? Rebellion as a brand. Influencers on stage talk about how edginess sells, how shock equals shares. One screen flashes luxury ads featuring subtle satanic motifs, horns disguised as hairdos, pentagrams rebranded as starbursts. You spot a perfume ad titled Fallen. The model gazes into the camera like she's already been damned, but in the coolest way possible. And there it is. The devil, once the ultimate outsider, has been bought, repackaged, and sold back to us as an aesthetic. Edginess for sale. Rebellion on a payment plan. Even Lucifer bows to consumerism now, because that's where the real power is. But deeper still, beneath the marketing, beneath the mockery, you sense something else. A current of fear. A feeling that maybe, just maybe, some of these symbols still hold a charge. Like plutonium in a velvet box. Pretty. Deadly. You pass a storefront now, its mannequins draped in crimson robes and glittering horns. No text, just a symbol. A goat's head rendered in chrome. People line up to buy. Not because they believe, but because it looks like they might. You pause at a bench made of black glass. A stock ticker runs along its edge. Instead of numbers, it scrolls Latin phrases. Lux in tenebris, fiat voluntas mea, non serviam. Light in darkness, let my will be done. I will not serve. A low chuckle vibrates through the air, digital, echoing. It doesn't scare you. You've heard worse in ad campaigns. but it lingers. And now, the scholarly whisper. A professor of semiotics once claimed that modern Luciferian imagery functions like cultural jazz. Improvised, referential, symbolic, without always being sincere. "We don't worship the devil anymore," she said. "We just wear him like a leather jacket, cool, rebellious, slightly musty. You rise, brushing imaginary ash from your sleeves. You walk past a mirror and catch a glimpse, not of horns, but of ambition. That's what Lucifer is here. Not evil, just drive. Untethered, unapologetic, beautiful and maybe a little dangerous. You exit the tower, finally. The elevator hums softly. As the doors close, you notice the floor button is marked not with numbers, but symbols. A star, a flame, a serpent. You press the last one, descending now. No flames, just a low synth beat, and the whisper of silk on polished stone. You emerge from the elevator into a tunnel. It's not dark, not exactly, but lit by a strange glow that doesn't have a source. The walls are covered in glossy screens, and each one plays something different. A scene from a cartoon, a rap video, a fashion show, a toothpaste ad. You recognize all of it, even if you can't name a single title. This is where the devil became background noise, because here, in this cultural crossroads, Lucifer isn't lurking in shadows or delivering grand monologues. He's lip-syncing in music videos, posing on magazine covers, blinking in the corner of memes you scrolled past too fast to notice. The morning star is now an algorithm-friendly motif. Palatable, market-tested, filtered. You walk slowly, hands grazing the smooth edge of a screen showing a pop idol with a serpent coiled around her arm. She winks, and the serpent flickers, almost as if it recognizes you. There's no fire here, just mood lighting. No pitchfork, just props. The mainstream moment hits fast. The 2014 MTV VMAs. You remember? That performance, the one with devil horns, a flaming set, and backup dancers in robes. It made headlines, think pieces, YouTubers with thumbnails like Elite Symbolism Explained. And yet, behind all that buzz, the stage was just a set, the devil just a costume, the outrage just another metric. And that's the trick, isn't it? The more we use Lucifer as a visual punchline, the less he frightens. He's been declawed, memified. When you see Satan in a cereal ad, the exorcism's already happened. He's just branding now. You pass a screen looping scenes from children's shows. A cutesy goat with little horns. A song with the line, "Better to lead than to serve," tucked between bubblegum verses. Subtle, but not accidental. Here's your quirky tidbit. A few years ago, a kids' cartoon actually aired an episode where the villain literally quoted Milton's Satan, verbatim. "It is better to reign in hell than serve in heaven," said a robot overlord made of recycled parts. The writers later claimed it was just a nod. But was it? Historians still argue whether the prevalence of Luciferian motifs in mainstream entertainment is intentional, subliminal, or just the result of creatives reaching for the oldest, most dramatic archetype available. Is the devil's image actually being pushed, or is he just the best prop in the warehouse? You sit in a plush red chair, the kind you find in boutique theatres that sell craft soda. A trailer plays. The protagonist, a charming anti-hero with a pentagram tattoo and a backstory involving betrayal, exile, and misunderstood brilliance. He's cool. He's clever. He has a tragic playlist and a British accent. Audiences love him. You chuckle, softly. It's always the same beat. The devil, but make him relatable. That's the new formula. Sprinkle in sympathy, add trauma, shoot it with expensive lighting. Boom. He's not evil. He's just misunderstood. Another screen plays a commercial. A high-end sneaker ad. The camera pans down to show the soles are red, bright red. A whisper of inverted crosses stitched in. The voiceover promises unapologetic power. You blink. Just a shoe, right? Then a music video flashes. The singer wears horns, dances on a fiery stage, then descends into the underworld on a stripper pole. You remember the internet frenzy, the think pieces, the outrage, the hashtags. But you also remember the streams, the charts, The sales spike. Satan sells. Next, a fashion line. The brand is subtle, but the themes aren't. Black leather, sigils stitched onto sleeves. A model struts with wings, not angelic, but sharp. Someone says the look is devilcore. Someone else says, it's just camp. The phrase repeats in your head like a sleepy lullaby. It's just camp. It's just camp. Until it's not. Because as you glide past more glowing screens, you realize something odd. Each time the devil appears, on stage, in a logo, as a costume, he's not there to terrify. He's there to provoke, to glitter, to make you click. He's not the villain anymore. He's the content. A professor's voice hums in from somewhere off screen. We're no longer afraid of the devil. We're afraid of irrelevance. You don't know who said it, but it fits. You lean against a wall plastered with concert posters. All of them feature flames, goats, crimson fonts, and stars turned just slightly sideways. Not enough to sue, just enough to suggest. You start to wonder if rebellion's been fully gentrified. In a quiet alcove, a panel shows a timeline. The 1960s, satanic panic. The 1980s, metal bands and backmasking hysteria. The 2000s, emo rebellion. The 2020s, he's a fashion trend, a Halloween filter, a vibe. And here's something eerie. In a 2022 survey, nearly a quarter of Gen Z respondents said they viewed satanic symbolism in pop culture as just edgy fun, not moral concern. It's not the end of the world, but it might be the end of the devil's mystique. You walk now through a corridor lined with Funko Pops. Even Lucifer can be molded into a bobblehead. A final screen lights up. A sleepy-eyed TikToker explains the aesthetic of the morning star. They use a soft voice, ring lights bouncing in their pupils. It's not like about evil, they say. It's just like energy, you know? Transformation. Their room glows red. You hear wind chimes. And maybe that's the strangest part. The devil, once a figure of eternal damnation, now lives in ring lights and reposts. He's a TikTok audio, a Spotify aesthetic, a Pinterest mood board labeled Dark Academia, but make it sexy. You reach the end of the tunnel, the screens dim behind you, and ahead, there's nothing but a stage, empty, lit by soft red. A mic waits in the center. It's your turn. But don't worry, you don't have to say anything. Just walk slowly, own the moment, look good doing it. That's what he would do. The stage falls away behind you, dissolving like ash on the wind, and suddenly you're walking through a cathedral. Not of God, but of spectacle. Its arches are made of stadium lights. The stained glass windows replay Super Bowl halftime shows. Choirs chant in auto-tune. And at the altar, a single camera, always watching, always rolling. You're in the church of media now, and here, Lucifer is no longer a character. He's a rhythm, a formula, a glittering pattern behind the pixels, looping endlessly through remakes, controversies, and viral hits. You can't see him, but you feel his influence in how stories are told, which faces get famous, and which rebels are carefully curated. You pass a marble pillar etched with movie posters, each one louder than the last. A hero with glowing eyes, a villain who isn't really a villain, a tagline promising, "Dare to disobey." You've seen it before, haven't you? Not that exact one, but something close. There's a template. Lucifer's silhouette is stitched into it like a watermark. And here comes your mainstream moment, 2015's Lucifer, the TV show. A dapper devil leaves hell to solve crimes in LA, sipping whiskey and cracking jokes. He's charming, handsome, deeply wounded, but trying. You weren't surprised that audiences fell in love with him. You were surprised it took so long. Critics praised the nuanced complexity. Fans wrote fan fiction. Somewhere along the line, the Prince of Darkness became a certified heartthrob. Now glance left. There's your quirky tidbit. In 1971, a radio DJ named Les Crane released a spoken word track called Desiderata. On the B-side, a bizarre monologue titled The Devil's Advice in which a smooth-voiced Satan offers practical life tips like never loan money to relatives and stay out of politics. It wasn't satire, it wasn't scary, it was strangely comforting. The record quietly became a cult classic. Lucifer as a life coach, decades before streaming caught up. Historians still argue whether pop culture's embrace of the devil is meant to provoke traditional morality or just capitalize on its collapse. Is he being softened to reflect shifting values, or is he being marketed to fill the spiritual vacuum left behind? You descend into pews lined with LED strips. Each one glows a different shade of red, like mood lighting at a nightclub. On a massive screen overhead, a montage plays. Music videos, game trailers, perfume ads, Oscar speeches. They all borrow something from Lucifer. The elegance, the defiance, the invitation to say no beautifully. A voice murmurs beside you, low and clear. What we fear, we glamorize, and what we glamorize, we forget to question. You look over, but no one's there. Above you, a gospel choir explodes into sound, but they're singing in reverse. The melody is haunting, familiar. You realize it's a reversed rendition of a pop hit with once scandalous lyrics. Now it's just a TikTok dance. The devil doesn't need to possess anyone. He just needs to trend. A younger you would have scoffed at this, would have dismissed it as coincidence or creative laziness. But tonight, as the images swirl, horns tucked into costume design, sigils embedded in set decoration, lyrics dripping with faux ritual language, you start to wonder, not if it's real, but if it matters whether it's real. You walk beneath a massive dome. The fresco above is animated, pulsing like a heartbeat. It depicts the fall, not just of angels, but of icons. One moment you see Lucifer, brilliant and brazen. The next, a pop star shaving their head, a cancelled comedian, a fashion designer ousted for tweeting too much truth. The fall is eternal here, public, streamed in 4K, and yet the crowd cheers. Because in this cathedral, the devil is relatable. He's the one who spoke out, who said what you're not supposed to say, who broke the rules and got punished for it. Sound familiar? You pass a confessional booth. Inside, a neon sign flashes. Tell me your truth. You enter. The screen flickers on. It doesn't ask what sins you've committed. It asks how many followers you've gained since. You exit into a side chapel, this one dedicated to film. Projectors line the walls. Each reel plays a different iteration of Lucifer. Al Pacino in The Devil's Advocate, all charisma and corruption. Tim Curry's demonic lord in Legend, terrifying and oddly seductive. Even Disney's Fantasia, with Chernabog spreading wings over a mountain. The devil, repackaged for every decade, every demographic. And now, the academic voice again, somewhere between thought and dream. Lucifer survives because he evolves. He doesn't resist media, he becomes it. You pass a gift shop. Yes, even here. The shelves are stocked with irony, plush devils, keychains shaped like tridents, designer candles labeled Sinner's Musk. One t-shirt reads, "Sympathy for the devil, now available in every size." You don't laugh, because deep down, you understand what's happening. Lucifer is no longer a villain. He's a vessel. He carries rebellion and beauty and irony, and most dangerously, relatability. That's the real trick. When you leave the cathedral, it's not through a grand stone door, but through a turnstile. You scan your wrist, and it beeps green. You're back outside. Except the city now looks different. Every billboard hums. Every brand logo feels slightly off. A curve here, a flicker there. The stars are still in the sky, but some of them form shapes you weren't taught to name. You glance down. Your own shadow has horns. Not big ones, just enough. You don't flinch when you see the horns. You just sigh. Because by now, they feel familiar. Not threatening, not evil. More like accessories. A vibe. Something that was probably sold to you in pieces, in songs and stories, until the idea of horns on your shadow became as ordinary as your phone's glow. You walk through the city. It hums quietly, not with chaos, but with a kind of soft, neon blasphemy. Every billboard pulses in crimson tones. A streaming service ad flickers with the tagline, "Rebel, rise, repeat." A perfume commercial shows a figure falling through clouds, then landing barefoot in high heels. The name of the scent? Eve's Regret. You chuckle through your nose. It's subtle, but not subtle. At the next corner, there's a bus stop shelter wrapped in an ad for a fast food chain. In the background, flames, horns, a smiling devil mascot offering hot wings. You imagine someone designed that in a windowless office, sipping a pumpkin spice latte thinking, "This'll go viral." It probably did. You remember when devils in media were either monstrous or metaphoric? Now, they're playable characters, fashion icons, viral memes. They've been merchandised into plushies and phone grips. You once saw a toddler in a onesie that read, "Little Devil," and nobody blinked. There's a fringe tidbit floating up from memory. In the early 2000s, a European toy line released a set of dolls known as the Fallen Angels, each one themed after a deadly sin. The packaging was slick. The designs, gorgeous. Critics called it inappropriate. Collectors called it art. It was banned in 2 countries. It also sold out in 3. You glance up at a massive mural. Street art this time. A stylized Lucifer, graffiti wings unfurled, painted over the side of a repurposed church. He holds a spray can in one hand and a halo like a frisbee in the other. Tagline below in cursive, "Create your own Eden." Historians still argue whether pop culture's obsession with fallen figures is rooted in genuine rebellion, or just nostalgia for a story that's more fun than the original. Is this the devil's influence, or just clever marketing? A thought occurs. You've barely seen any crosses. Not real ones anyway. Only upside-down ones, twisted into fashion. Crosses made of bones. Crosses bent into logos. You wonder when holiness got rebranded as a design flaw. You pass a bookstore window. Front and center, self-help books with cheeky titles. Temptation Tactics. Be Your Own Lucifer. The Power of the Exile Archetype. And, of course, a memoir from a pop star who reclaimed hell as a metaphor for fame. You don't buy any of them. You've already read this story in 1,000 ways. You keep walking. Now you're in a museum district. Well, what used to be one. The old signs for natural history and astronomy have been half obscured by newer installations. One gallery calls itself The Art of Defiance. Inside, you spot sculptures made of broken halos and paintings of angels with one wing scorched. The guidebook says the exhibit explores the mythic potential of Lucifer as muse. You sit on a cold bench in the center of it all, surrounded by visitors posing for selfies next to a giant mirror etched with the words, "Fall with grace." You start to feel it again, that strange blend of aesthetic pleasure and creeping disquiet. Because even if none of this is sinister exactly, it's not neutral either. It's suggestive. You're being whispered to, gently, constantly. Look at how beautiful it is to break away. Look how glamorous it is to stand alone. Look how freeing it feels to question everything except the whisper. The air shifts. A wind, somehow from indoors. The lights dim to a faint reddish hue. One corner of the gallery glows brighter. There's a new exhibit, recently added. The plaque reads, "The Lucifer Effect in Consumer Mythology." It's a looping video projected on mist. You watch as familiar brand logos dissolve into inverted symbols. A soda can morphs into a chalice. A shoe transforms into a hoofprint. A famous hamburger clown now wears a crown of thorns. It's not subtle. It's not satire. You hear the narration softly. In the postmodern world, sin is just a rebrand away from sensation. Someone behind you whispers, "It's art." Another replies, "It's just edgy." A third says, "It's probably nothing." You exhale. Because that's what they always say. You walk out into the night. The city's rhythm thumps beneath your feet. A bass line pulses from a rooftop. You follow it. Up winding stairs, past velvet ropes, onto a rooftop club. The crowd here moves like smoke, faces painted with half masks, all silver and red. The DJ spins tracks named things like Heaven's Exit and Cherub Burn. A woman dances in boots shaped like hooves. A man with black feathered wings takes selfies with a plastic pitchfork. Someone hands you a drink called Forbidden Apple. The menu promises it's infused with temptation. You sip. It's sweet. Of course it is. You sway with the crowd, unsure if this is a party or a sermon. And maybe that's the point. Lucifer doesn't want your soul anymore. He wants your attention, your playlist, your engagement metrics. And you've given it freely, haven't you? Because rebellion is easier when it's choreographed. You leave the club with glitter in your hair, the drink still fizzing on your tongue. On the sidewalk, you spot a billboard. It reads, "Don't follow rules, follow vibes." Below it, a stylized horned face, grinning. You cross the street, and you don't even look both ways. The sidewalk stretches under your feet like a conveyor belt now. Automatic, smooth, too easy. The city has gone quieter. Not asleep, but hushed, like a theatre right before the final act. Above you, the sky is bruised with colour. Not the normal inky black of night, but a deep, smoky purple threaded with embers. Somewhere far off, thunder rumbles without lightning. Just sound, just mood. You find yourself in a plaza, wide, empty, eerily symmetrical. Everything's too polished. The buildings shimmer with mirrored glass. There's no trash, no cracks, not even a single pigeon. The centerpiece? A black cube sculpture with golden veins glowing like slow lava. You realize it's pulsing in rhythm with your breath. You sit on its edge. It's warm. And here's where the whisper turns into a monologue. You've heard Lucifer symbolized in rebellion, in glam, in streaming TV. But here, in this part of the city, the quiet heart, he's stripped down to concept. A pure, simmering idea. The serpent before the fruit. The voice that says, "Why not you?" The silence after, "Because I said so." And most of all, the moment just before you say no. A digital screen blinks on. It plays clips. You don't recognize most of them. Foreign films, vintage cartoons, esoteric commercials from the 90s. In each, the same shape recurs. The flicker of flame, the wink, the rise. A character breaking free. Not always evil, sometimes the opposite. The villain who saves the day by refusing to obey. The angel who lies for love. The child who runs from a rigid truth. There's a fringe fact you catch from memory. In 1997, a short-lived ad campaign for a Scandinavian soda called Lucida featured a horned silhouette encouraging viewers to taste clarity through defiance. Sales were terrible, but the imagery stuck around. A decade later, its symbol re-emerged on luxury gym gear marketed to spiritual rebels. Even failed devils don't stay dead. Historians still argue whether Lucifer's symbolic spread is deliberate infiltration or just pop culture cannibalizing its own taboos for lack of new ideas. Either way, the effect is the same. Saturation. Not belief, but presence. The devil is background radiation now. Not loud, but everywhere. You feel it most in the things no one notices anymore, like the school play that cast Lucifer as a misunderstood anti-hero, or the makeup tutorial called Infernal Beauty with millions of views, or the motivational speaker who opens with, "Even the devil was an angel once." None of it's wrong exactly, just reframed, repackaged. You're pulled forward again, now into a library, but not one filled with dusty books. No, this is digital, walls of touchscreens, infinite scrolls, curated tabs. The space is silent except for the hum of electricity and faint whispers from headphone-clad visitors watching videos about the power of the archetype. You browse. The database is vast. Lucifer through the lens of psychology, through fashion, through urban design, TED Talks explaining his narrative arc, academic PDFs analyzing his brand equity, memes dissected like scripture, and then your own reflection. One of the mirrored walls flickers and shows you, but with subtle changes. You're cleaner, glossier, a bit taller. The lighting makes your eyes sharper, your smile more self-assured. There's something magnetic about this version of you. Unapologetic, unbothered, stylishly aloof. This version is adored. You reach toward the reflection and your fingertips graze glass. It's warm. There's a button below that says Become. You don't press it. You just sit there for a while, listening to the air vibrate. Because now you understand. Luciferian symbolism in pop culture isn't just about devils or demons or pentagrams in plain sight. It's about mood, a flavor, an attitude sold in fragments, through fonts, through lighting, through one-liners in movies that make you cheer when someone breaks the rules just right. It's a soft revolution, velvet-lined. He doesn't scare you anymore. He doesn't have to. He fascinates instead. The same way a prism does when it splits a beam of light into colors you weren't expecting. The same way a lie feels when it's comforting. The same way a story sounds when it ends with, "And they were never sorry." You exit the library, and this time, you're walking toward the edge of the city. The buildings taper off into a hill. The night grows quieter. The lights dim, then vanish. And ahead, a fire, small, contained. You sit near it, cross-legged, like a child at a sleepover ghost story circle. But no one's telling the story. You're remembering it yourself, from all the clues, all the flickers, all the horns hidden in plain sight. You realize you've never lived in a world without Lucifer in the background. Just a world that didn't admit he was the blueprint for half its stories. Not worshipped, just woven. Rebellion, seduction, independence, beauty, exile, glamour. A bouquet of carefully sharpened ideas. And now you know, not because someone warned you, but because you were paying attention. You glance at the fire again. It doesn't crackle. It glows like a slow heartbeat. You watch the shadows it casts. They stretch far, looping behind you like a cloak. You don't look back. You just let them follow. You're not sure when the fire fades. You only notice the cold. Not a dramatic chill, just a gentle, creeping coolness that wraps around your ankles like fog. The city is behind you now, far off, its glow reduced to a vague smear across the horizon. Ahead, there's only a narrow path lined with wind-worn stones and crooked branches that look like reaching hands. You follow it, of course, because that's what you've been doing all night, wandering through this quiet exorcism disguised as exploration. Your footsteps fall softer now. The ground isn't concrete anymore. It's dust, dry and light, like ash that remembers being fire. You pass a crumbling statue, not of an angel or devil, just a face, human, carved with a curious half smile. You feel like it's watching you, not with menace, with permission. The wind rustles through skeletal trees, and somewhere an owl calls once, then doesn't again. The sound doesn't scare you. It feels scripted, like the night itself is a stage play, and you're the final actor still awake. You come to a broken sign half buried in weeds. The letters barely cling to the wood. You can't read the full message, just one word, faded but legible. Fallen. You smile. Of course. Because now you've seen the full circle. Luciferian symbolism isn't always fire and brimstone. Often it's just suggestion, a carefully sharpened question, a melody that hums, "What if the fall was freedom?" A visual that asks, "Aren't wings meant to be used?" You pass an old billboard in the middle of nowhere. Strange that it's here, alone in the wild. It shows a clean-cut actor holding a briefcase, standing on the edge of a skyscraper. Text above him, "Redefine the edge." In the corner, the logo of a luxury tech brand shaped like a stylized serpent eating its tail. Historians still argue whether the Ouroboros was meant to symbolize eternity or ego. Maybe both. Maybe the ego just wears eternity as a mask. You find a bench under a twisted tree. You sit. You rest. And now you recall things you forgot, like how early Renaissance painters often portrayed Lucifer not with red skin and horns, but with sadness, with eyes full of knowledge, with faces that looked oddly familiar, as if you might have passed them in the mirror once. There's a fringe claim, rarely repeated, that one artist modelled Lucifer's fall after his own self-portrait, then later destroyed the sketch in a fire he said had no earthly source. You believe that? Maybe. The stars emerge above you, shy and pale. You notice a constellation you've never seen before. It doesn't have a name. It isn't listed on apps. But it looks like a single line bending sharply, like a broken halo or a turning path. You trace it with your fingertip in the air, smiling faintly, as if it's a secret only the insomniacs get to see. The night thickens, softer, sleepier. You remember the club, the sculpture, the mirror wall version of yourself, and it all folds into a quiet question. Was it ever really Lucifer you were chasing? Or just the part of yourself that liked the echo of challenge, of mystery, of art that makes you tilt your head sideways, and music that feels one note off but somehow more beautiful for it? You lean back on the bench. The wind breathes gently against your face. The fire's long gone now. The symbols dim. The night forgives. You're not afraid, not even curious anymore, just full of strange images that no longer alarm you, full of flickering stories told in red neon and velvet capes and angel-shaped perfume bottles, full of a world that turned rebellion into rhythm and rhythm into comfort. And now, finally, you feel yourself let go. The ground beneath you softens, the stars stretch, the silence presses close, like a blanket. You let the pace slow now. Everything moves in molasses. Words get heavy, like the hush before snowfall. Your thoughts stretch long and lazy, like cats in a sunbeam. The sharp edges of memory dull to a smooth blur. Even the devil's horns feel rounded now, harmless, half asleep, symbolic in the gentlest possible way. That city of shadows and whispers fades behind your closed eyelids. The symbols dissolve. The glowing cube, the feathered strangers, the cheeky perfume ads. All of them melt into soft impressions. Just colors now, maybe a feeling. The trace of a voice that no longer needs to say anything at all. You're safe here. You always were. No fire, no test, no sin. Just a story told in quiet, flickering pieces that let your brain coast into the space between thoughts. You're not alone. Millions before you have sat under this same sky, turning over stories like stones, wondering which were warnings and which were riddles, which were lies, and which were just old truths dressed up for new audiences. But none of that matters now. What matters is the rhythm of your breath, the softness of the air, the feeling that even the symbols have curled up to rest beside you. Sleep comes easily now, not because the story ended, but because you no longer need to follow it. It will still be here when you wake. Until then, drift, float, let go. The lights are dim, the whispers are fading. And you, dear listener, you're free to sleep.